A chef in Pasadena looked at the order ticket for table 9 on a Friday night in April and read the name on the reservation and said, in front of his entire kitchen brigade, that he was not going to cook for that table. Not because of a food allergy he couldn't accommodate. Not because the kitchen was overwhelmed. Not because of anything the table had done or said or requested. Because of who was sitting at it. Because of a story he had been carrying for 3 years. Because he had decided, sometime in the past 3 years, that the story made him right. He was wrong. He had 20 minutes left to understand that. The sous chef who was standing next to him when he said it, a woman named Rosa Medina, who had worked in his kitchen for 2 years and 3 months, and who had heard him say difficult things before, but had never heard him say anything like this, stood very still for a moment. Then she said, "Chef, think about what you're saying." He said, "I know exactly what I'm saying." She looked at him. She said, "Then I need you to know I can't be part of it." He looked at her the way a man looks at someone who has just told him something he did not expect and does not intend to accept. He said, "Then go stand by the pass and stay out of my way." She went to the pass. She stood there for a moment. Then she walked out of the kitchen, through the dining room, and to the table. What happened in the next 20 minutes changed the trajectory of 3 people's careers, ended one, and produced a moment that Rosa Medina has described in the 2 years since as the clearest thing she has ever done in a professional kitchen. She does not say it with pride. She says it with the particular weight of someone who knows that clear does not always mean easy. There is a restaurant on Colorado Boulevard in Pasadena, California, called Ardent. 18 tables, a private dining room that seats 12, a kitchen with a glass wall facing the dining room. The kind of transparency that invites the diner to watch the work, to understand that the work is the point. The menu is market-driven, California seasonal, the kind of cooking that takes its authority from the ingredient rather than the technique, that believes the best thing you can do to a perfect tomato is almost nothing. The tasting menu runs 7 courses and is priced at $480 per person. The wine program is the responsibility of a sommelier named Daniel, who had come to wine from a prior career in architecture, and who brought to the cellar the same structural attention he had once brought to load-bearing calculations. Ardent had been open for 4 years. It had built its reputation the slow way, not through a launch that generated immediate industry attention, but through the cumulative testimony of people who had eaten there and told other people, without being asked, that they should. The dining room on a Friday night in April held the kind of quiet energy of a room that has been doing what it does long enough to do it without effort. Tables turning at the right pace. The kitchen's rhythm audible in the faintest way through the glass wall, the particular ease of a place that has found its stride. Keanu Reeves had a reservation at table 9 for 7:30. He had made it under his own name, which he sometimes did and sometimes did not, depending on the restaurant and what he was hoping for from the evening. He had come to Ardent twice before, once 18 months ago, and once 8 months ago. And both times the meal had been quiet and good and exactly what he had come for, a table. Some food worth thinking about. A couple of hours away from the particular logistics of his own life. He had not expected to be recognized on either visit, and had not been. Which was both the point of the plain clothes and the canvas jacket, and the boots, and a testament to the kind of restaurant Ardent was, where the staff were professionals who understood that the dining room was not a space for performances of recognition. He arrived at 7:28 with a woman named Claire, a colleague from a production he had finished 2 months earlier, who had chosen Ardent because she had heard about it 3 times in 10 days from 3 separate people and had decided that 3 unsolicited recommendations constituted a sign. They were shown to table 9. Daniel came and discussed the wine, The first course was described by their server, a man named James, who had been at Ardent for 3 years. In the kitchen, the ticket for table 9 arrived at the pass at 7:41. The chef read the reservation name on the ticket. He put it down. He looked at Rosa. He said, "I'm not cooking for that table." Matteo Voss had been the executive chef and owner of Ardent for 4 years. Before Ardent, he had been the head chef of a restaurant in Silver Lake, a restaurant called Meridian Table, which had opened 8 years ago to significant attention, and which had, in its second year, received a review in a nationally read food publication that had established its reputation and generated a waiting list that lasted 14 months. Matteo had built Meridian Table's menu from scratch, had trained the kitchen brigade, had been the creative force behind every dish on every menu from the opening night through the 4th year. In the 4th year, the ownership structure had changed, not dramatically. A restructuring of the investors behind the restaurant, a reconfiguration of who held what percentage, who had what authority, the kind of internal shift that exists in the documentation and not on the menu or the sign above the door. And in the process of that restructuring, a decision had been made about the creative direction of the restaurant that Matteo had not agreed with, and had not been consulted about, and had not been able to reverse. The person who had been brought in to mediate the dispute between the ownership group and the chef, the person whose recommendation had ultimately shaped the outcome, was a food consultant named David Park, who had at that point been working in restaurant consulting for 11 years, and who had a reputation in the industry as someone whose judgments about the commercial viability of a creative vision were reliable in a specific and sometimes brutal way. David Park had recommended that the restaurant move in a direction that did not include Matteo Voss's menu. Matteo had left Meridian Table 9 months before he had planned to. He had left without the equity he had expected to leave with, because the equity question had been entangled in the dispute and had been resolved in a direction that was, by Matteo's accounting, unfair. He had spent 8 months believing that it was unfair, and 5 months being able to do nothing about it, and 3 months deciding to do the only thing he could actually do, which was to open his own place on his own terms on Colorado Boulevard in Pasadena. He had built Ardent with the specific anger of someone who has been told their vision is commercially unviable and who has decided to prove the contrary. Not openly, not in anything he said in interviews or to his staff. But it was there in the foundation of every decision he made. The market-driven menu that was also a rebuke. The glass kitchen wall that said, "Look at this work and tell me it is not worth looking at." The waiting list that had formed in the 3rd month, and that he tracked with a private satisfaction that he would not have admitted to anyone. Keanu Reeves had, at a dinner 14 months after Matteo left Meridian Table, been seated at a table next to David Park. They had spoken briefly, 2 or 3 minutes, the kind of incidental conversation that happens at shared social events when the people present know each other adjacently. A photograph from the evening had appeared in a trade publication's coverage of the event. David Park on the left, Keanu Reeves on the right, both of them in conversation. Matteo had seen the photograph he had built. From the photograph, and from everything he already felt about David Park and the year he had lost, a story. The story was not supported by the available evidence. It did not need to be. It had the emotional architecture of a story that explains an injustice, which means it felt true in a way that was independent of whether it was true. And Matteo Voss had been carrying it for 3 years. The story was, Keanu Reeves and David Park were friends. Keanu had known about the recommendation. Keanu had been at the table where the decision about Matteo's future had been made, or near enough to it that the distinction did not matter. The story was entirely false. Keanu Reeves did not know David Park. The dinner had been a film industry event at which 240 people were present. The 2-minute conversation had been about nothing of consequence. David Park had not known that the man he was speaking to had never heard of Meridian Table. None of this was available to Mateo from the photograph. None of this had been sought. He had built the story the way grieving people build stories, from the available material assembled into the shape that the grief required. He had been carrying it for 3 years. And now the name was on the ticket at the pass. He put the ticket down. He said, "I'm not cooking for that table." Rosa Medina had been in professional kitchens for 9 years when she took the sous chef position at Ardent. Before Ardent, 2 years in a kitchen in San Diego where she had learned discipline. Before that, 3 years in 2 kitchens in Los Angeles where she had learned speed. Before that, the culinary program at a community college in the Inland Empire where she had learned, more importantly than any technique, the thing her instructor had told her in the first week: the kitchen is not about you. The kitchen is about the plate. She had heard versions of this in every kitchen she had worked in since, and she had watched it be true and watched it be ignored, and she had developed, over 9 years, the ability to tell the difference between a chef who believed it and a chef who said it. Mateo Voss, when she had interviewed at Ardent, had said it. In the 2 years and 3 months since, she had watched him believe it most of the time. The kitchen he ran was genuinely about the plate. The standards were real. The care was real. But she had also watched, in those 2 years and 3 months, the moments when something else came in under the kitchen door. A story from before Ardent. A grievance that did not have a clean exit. A quality of bitterness around certain topics that did not match the man who stood at the pass and tasted the first course of every service with the full attention of someone for whom the tasting was. Never routine. She had noted these moments and filed them and had not known what to do with the file. The moment at the pass on a Friday night in April was when the file became something she had to act on. She went to the pass. She stood for a moment. She heard the kitchen continuing, the sounds of a brigade that was one direction short of its full leadership, moving through the first act of a Friday's service on the momentum of their training, waiting for the next instruction. She walked out of the kitchen. She walked through the dining room. She came to table 9. The man in the canvas jacket and dark jeans looked up. The woman with him looked up. The table had wine and the amuse-bouche that had already been sent before the ticket arrived, and the particular settled quality of 2 people who have found a good table on a Friday evening and are in no hurry about anything. Rosa said, "Good evening. I'm the sous chef. I need to speak with you for a moment, and I want to be direct with you because I think that's what the situation deserves." The man looked at her. He said, "All right." She said, "There is a situation in the kitchen that is going to affect your service tonight, and I want you to hear it from me rather than through a delay you can't account for. I can't give you the specifics. What I can tell you is that I want to apologize on behalf of this kitchen, and that I am going to do everything in my power to make this evening what it should be. If you'll give me 10 minutes, I think I can give you that." He looked at her. He said, "What kind of situation?" She said, "The kind I'm working on right now." He held her gaze for a moment. He said, "Take your 10 minutes." She went back to the kitchen. She found Mateo at the far end of the prep station, away from the brigade, the ticket still on the pass. She stood in front of him. She said, "I need you to hear something." He said, "Rosa," she said, "I need you to hear it. That's all I'm asking. 30 seconds. He looked at her. Something in the way she said it, the steadiness, the fact that she was not angry, just direct, just present, made him stop. She said, "Whatever story you have about that table, Whatever you believe about why that name means what you think it means, you need to ask yourself right now if you have ever actually verified it. Not felt it. Not assembled it. Verified it. He was quiet. She said, "Because I have watched you run a kitchen for 2 years and 3 months, that is the best work you have ever done. And I watched you put a ticket down 20 minutes ago because of a story, and I need you to ask yourself if the story is worth what you are doing with it right now." He said, "You don't know what he." She said, "I know that you read a name on a ticket and made a decision that could end this restaurant. And I know that you made it based on something you saw in a photograph and built into something it may not be." The kitchen was running. The brigade was moving. The Friday service did not wait. He said, "If you knew what Park did," she said, "I believe that what happened at Meridian Table was wrong. I have believed that since you told me about it. And I'm telling you that the man at Table 9 is not David Park. And whatever connection you have built between them in 3 years, I need you to ask yourself, right now, tonight, whether it is real or whether it is what grief makes when it has nowhere else to go." He stood very still. She said, "Pick up the ticket, chef." The kitchen sounds were the only sound. He picked up the ticket. The first course arrived at Table 9 at 8:03, not 20 minutes after the ticket had been placed. 22 minutes. Rosa had added 2 minutes to her 10, and nobody at Table 9 had counted. The food was extraordinary. This is not a detail to pass over. The food at Ardent on a Friday night in April, sent from a kitchen whose chef had just been redirected from the edge of a catastrophic decision by a sous chef who had told him a hard thing and then handed him back his work. That food was the best that kitchen had produced in 4 years. James, the server, would say this afterward, the way servers know things, that you can feel when a kitchen is cooking at the full height of what it is, and that this was that. The second course arrived at 8:24. The third at 8:51. At 9:15, Matteo Voss came out of the kitchen. He walked to Table 9. He did not introduce himself. The table knew who he was. The glass kitchen wall made sure of that. He said, "I owe you an apology. There was a problem in my kitchen at the start of your service that I am responsible for. The problem was mine. It had nothing to do with you, and it should not have affected your evening at all. I'm sorry that it came close to doing so." The man in the canvas jacket looked at him. He said, "Thank you for saying that." Matteo looked at him, really looked at him the way you look at someone when you are trying to see them past the story you have been carrying about them, trying to find the actual person in the space where the story used to be. He said, "Can I ask you something?" He said, "Go ahead." He said, "Do you know a consultant named David Park?" The man looked at him. He said, "I met someone by that name once briefly at an industry event. I couldn't tell you anything else about him." Matteo was quiet. He said, "That's what I needed to know." He said, "Thank you." He went back to the kitchen. He stood at the pass for a moment. Then he called the brigade together, all 5 of them, mid-service, 30 seconds, and he said, "The food going to Table 9 for the rest of the evening. I want it to be the best thing we have sent all year." Nobody asked why. They already knew. At 9:47, the sommelier Daniel came to the pass with a message from Table 9. The man in the canvas jacket had asked, through Daniel, whether he could speak with the sous chef before he left. Rosa came out of the kitchen at 9:52. She was still in her whites. She came to Table 9, and the man in the canvas jacket and the woman who was with him both looked at her with the particular attention of people who have understood, from the evening's texture, that something more than food had happened. He said, "I don't know what you did in that kitchen tonight, but I want to thank you for whatever it was." She said, "I did my job." He said, "You did more than that." She said, "I hope not. I hope what I did is what sous chefs are supposed to do when they see something going wrong." He said, "Is it?" She said, "It should be." He looked at her. He said, "Are you all right?" She said, "Yes." She said it, and then she understood that it was true, which it had not quite been at the pass at 7:41, and which it was now. She was all right. She had said the hard thing, and it had been heard, and the kitchen had cooked, and the food had gone out, and the evening had been what it was supposed to be. She said, "Thank you for giving me the 10 minutes. He said, "Thank you for asking for them." She went back to the kitchen. The bill arrived. He paid it. The tip was 38%, which James noted, and which Rosa heard about the following morning, and which she did not tell Matteo because there was no version of telling him that did not have too much weight attached to it. They left at 10:04. He held the door for a table, arriving late. Then they stepped out onto Colorado Boulevard, and the April air was warm and carried the particular smell of a Pasadena evening, which is jasmine if the wind is right, and he did not say anything about the kitchen or the 22 minutes, or the way the first course had arrived with a quality that told you something had happened in the room it came from. Claire said, "That was the best meal I've had in 2 years. He said, "Yes." She said, "Something happened in the kitchen, didn't it?" He said, "I think so." She said, "Are you going to ask about it?" He said no. She said, "Why not?" He said, "Because whatever it was, it got resolved. And the person who resolved it came out and did it with about as much grace as I've seen. That's enough to know." They walked toward the parking structure on Marengo Avenue. Matteo Voss did not sleep well on the Friday night. He lay awake in the specific way of a man who has come very close to doing something that would have undone 4 years of work, and who knows what undid it, and who is not entirely comfortable with how close the margin was. He got up at 6:00. He made coffee. He sat at the table with his laptop and, for the first time in 3 years, he looked up what he actually knew about David Park, as distinct from what he had built from the photograph and the year that had preceded it. He spent 40 minutes on this. He read the coverage of the Meridian table situation from the industry trades, the timeline, the statements, the names of the investors involved. He looked at what David Park's role had actually been, documented in the record. What he found was not exculpatory. Park had been involved. The recommendation had been real, and the consequences of it had been real. What he found was also more complicated than the story he had been carrying. More people involved, more decisions made at more levels, a situation that had a shape that was not the shape of a single person's malice directed at him. He sat with this for a long time. He opened a document and began to write. Not an account for anyone else, an account for himself, of the year at Meridian Table, what had actually happened as distinct from what the grief had assembled from it, and of the 3 years since, and of the Friday night in April when the grief had almost cost him Ardent. He wrote for 2 hours. He did not finish. He saved what he had, and closed the laptop and went to the restaurant for Saturday prep. He found Rosa already at the station, her mise en place half assembled, the kitchen quiet in the particular Saturday morning way. He said, "I want to talk to you." She looked up. He said, "Not here. After service. Can you stay?" She said, "Yes." After the Saturday dinner service, they sat in the dining room with the lights up and the tables reset for Sunday brunch. He told her what he had been carrying. Not the compressed version, not the version he had delivered in the brief explanations he had offered over 2 years when the bitterness surfaced and he had covered it. The full version, Leon, Meridian Table, the photograph, the 3 years. He told it the way you tell something when you have decided the cost of keeping it is too high. She listened. She did not offer comfort before she had finished listening. When he was done, she was quiet for a moment. She said, "Why are you telling me this?" He said, "Because last night you told me a hard thing and it was the right thing and you did it at considerable personal risk to yourself, and I have not acknowledged that." She said, "You heard it. That was enough." He said, "It wasn't enough. You could have lost your job for what you did at the pass." She said, "I know." He said, "Why did you do it?" She said, "Because the kitchen is not about you or me. It's about the plate." He looked at her. He said, "Who told you that?" She said, "An instructor. First week of culinary school." He said, "They were right." She said, "I know." He was quiet for a moment. He said, "I want to change something about how I run this kitchen. Specifically, the way I handle situations where something I'm carrying from before this place comes into the room. I don't know exactly what that change looks like yet, but I want your input on building it." She said, "I'll think about it." He said, "Good." She stood and put on her jacket. She said, "Matteo." He looked up. She said, "The food last night. The last 4 courses. After the pass." He said, "Yes." She said, "That was what you're capable of when the story isn't in the way." He sat with that. She went home. Rosa Medina became the head chef of Ardent 14 months after the Friday in April. Matteo restructured his role, remaining the owner, stepping back from day-to-day kitchen leadership, taking on the sourcing and producer relationships that had always been the foundation of the menu, and that had, in the years of running the kitchen himself, not gotten the attention they deserved. The arrangement suited the restaurant better than the previous one. The food in Rosa's first year as head chef was, by the account of the dining room and the kitchen alike, the best Ardent had produced. She hired a sous chef of her own, a young man named Kwame, 25 years old, 2 years out of culinary school, who had a quality she had been looking for in the interviews and had found in him. He asked questions rather than making pronouncements. She told him in his first week, "The kitchen is not about you. It's about the plate." He nodded as though he already knew it. She told him, "You'll be tested on that. Everyone is. What matters is what you do when you are." He asked what she meant. She told him about a Friday in April without identifying the participants. She told it starting with a ticket at the pass and ending with the 10 minutes at table 9 and the food that went out after. She told it as a case study, the way her culinary instructor had told stories, not for inspiration, but for preparation. Kwame listened to the whole thing. He said, "What would you have done if he hadn't picked up the ticket?" She said, "I would have run the service myself." He said, "Could you have?" She said, "I don't know. I was prepared to find out." Matteo Voss took a 6-week trip to Line in the summer after the restructuring. He had not been back since he was 17. He walked the streets from his father's old shop to the restaurant 3 blocks away that he had walked past every day from age 7 to 17. The restaurant was still there. It had a different name now, and the sign was different, but the building was the same, and the proportions of the windows were the same, and standing outside it he felt something he had not expected to feel, which was not grief and not satisfaction, but something closer to recognition. The recognition of a person who has been somewhere so many times in memory that arriving in the actual place is a kind of completion. He went in. He sat at a table near the window. He ordered the lunch menu. He ate it with the full attention of a chef eating someone else's food, tasting, understanding, noting the technique was good. The ingredients were seasonal, local, the thing the menu said they were. After the meal, he asked to speak to the chef. The chef came out, a woman about 40, in her whites, the kind of chef who comes out of the kitchen with the slight wariness of someone who has learned that the request to speak to the chef can go in many directions. He said, "In French, my name is Matteo Voss. I'm a chef from Los Angeles. I ate here as a child. Or I walked past. I never came in." She said, "Why not?" He said, "I thought it wasn't for me." She looked at him for a moment. She said, "And now?" He said, "Now I know better." He flew home 3 days later. He walked into Ardent on a Tuesday morning, a week before the fall menu launch, and found Rosa at the prep station. He stood in the kitchen for a moment and looked at the glass wall and the dining room beyond it, and the tables set for an evening that had not started yet. He said, "I went back." She said, "To Lion?" He said, "To the restaurant." She said, "How was it?" He said, "The food was good. The building was the same." She said, "Did it help?" He thought about it. He said, "I think it closed something." She said, "Good." She went back to the prep. He went to his office and opened the document he had started on the Saturday morning after the Friday in April, the one that was still unfinished. He read what he had written. He added 3 paragraphs. He saved it. He did not know if he would ever finish it. He knew it was not the kind of thing that finishes. I keep coming back to the 30 seconds. The moment when Rosa said 30 seconds. That's all I'm asking, and Matteo stopped. Not because she demanded it. Not because she outranked him. She didn't. Not because she threatened him. Because she said, "I need you to hear something," with a steadiness that communicated, "This is not about me. This is not about winning. This is about something that is true, and that you need to know." Most of us have been in a version of that moment. The moment when we have watched something going wrong and have had to decide whether to say the thing or step back. Whether the relationship can hold what the situation requires. Whether the cost of saying it is manageable. Whether we can do it in a way that makes it hearable rather than defensive. Most of us, in that moment, turn to our monitor. Rosa went to the pass. And then she walked through the dining room. And then she asked for 10 minutes. And then she went back and asked for 30 seconds. I think about the order of those actions and what each one cost. The walk through the dining room, where the table could see her, committed her to something before the conversation with Matteo had even happened. She could not walk back through the dining room having done nothing. She made herself accountable to the situation before the situation gave her the chance to reconsider. I wonder if that was deliberate. I think it was. I think she understood that the reconsideration was the risk, and that walking through the dining room made the reconsideration impossible, and that she needed the impossibility. I don't know if I would have been that clear about what I needed. I hope I would have. I know the monitor is always there. This story is fictional, inspired by Keanu Reeves' well-known reputation for the equanimity with which he receives both the best and the most difficult treatment the world offers him, and for the grace he extends to people on both sides of that experience. Drop a comment and tell me what stayed with you. The moment that kept coming back. Share this with someone who might need it today. Subscribe if you want more stories like this one. See you in the next one.